Thank you all for attending. I'm going to click over to the next slide. So this is our answer, as I was mentioning, to how things changed for us this year in 2020. And we're doing interview format in a town hall. And today we'll be doing a town hall with Eric Joachimsthaler from Vivaldi, who's just gone off vision for a second, but it's no problem. I'm not introducing you yet. I'm going to tell people how to work with us, right? So Eric is going to talk to us about the interaction field, and this is really fascinating, and you're going to love this. But let me first tell you how you interact with us, right? So you joined ISBM and our town hall. We were founded in 1982 and have nearly 40 member firms today. If you're one of our member firms, welcome. I'm glad you're here with us. We also have almost 30 academic fellows, of which Eric is one, and a lot of B2B partners that are selected specifically because of what we know you need. There's a picture of Eric. He'll be back in a second. And there I am in a photograph that I prefer, but you know, it is what it is today. Here's how we want you to interact with us. So we're in a format that is a format that allows you to type in your questions to us. If you roll over the bottom or top of your screen, you'll probably find this toolbar, and there's a little Q on top of something that looks like a folder. If you click on that, you can type in your question there. And so we prefer at any point in time during this, if you'll type in your question, I'll be monitoring those questions and I will field them to Eric. So just feel free to type them in. And we're going to keep everybody on mute and without video who's attending, just for bandwidth, since we're going to be doing this in real time and we're going to try not to have any lag. We always get asked, can I get the slides or the discussion from this? And the answer is yes. So we record all of our webinars and town halls. If you're a member, you can find even the oldest ones back in B2B Pulse, and you can search for those. If they're within 30 days, you'll find them on isbm.com. So you can feel free to go there. If you registered for this event, you'll actually be sent a link with the information as well. If you borrowed someone's registration, they'll get the link and they'll have to forward that to you, but you can feel free to register again and we'll be happy to send it to you. This is our leadership team. Again, my picture there. Rand Mendez, you will have heard from if you're a member, because he is in direct contact with all of our members, and about this time of year he's in direct contact with all of you as we talk about your plans for next year. Becky Williams is our curriculum director. Stefan manages the research end of all of this at Penn State. Lori Liccolini actually does all of the work, and Ralph Aliba provides great commentary behind the scenes and tells us we look good. Ralph was my previous and he's still very active with us. We have a wide variety of fellows from around the world, and I'm happy here to be able to introduce Eric as one of our fellows as well. So you see a list of kind of where the folks come from, as well as member firms from across the board. And if you would like to follow up with us, we hope that you'll just take this down. We'll show it again at the end, but you can contact Eric directly, or Rand Mendez about membership, or myself about any other questions, and we'll be happy to help you. Okay, so just a little peek ahead as we get ready and make sure folks have all gotten in. We have today's town hall. Next month, Laura Patterson will be talking to us about her new book and helping us understand how you can grow organically with customer centricity. And then please do put in your calendars, our Marketing Excellence Roundtable will be in late January next year. We have one more course available, and as I mentioned earlier, anything that we've done in the past is available in our library. You can start at isbm.com and that'll navigate you to B2B Pulse. Okay, that's me. And now I'm going to ditch this. If I can figure that out. I'm going to stop sharing. There we are. Okay, so now it should just be Eric and I talking. And
Hi.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so glad to have you here, Eric. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm really excited to talk about your book and about your insights and about these companies that you've been working with. I'll again say to everybody as we get started, if you have a question, just type it into the Q&A box and we'll get to it. So let me just introduce Eric for a second. If you haven't met him before at any of our events or haven't had a chance to interact with him. Eric is the founder and the CEO of Vivaldi, and he's got his logo behind him. Vivaldi is the largest independent strategy and brand business transformation firm in the world. He's the current author of 2 award-winning books. His first book was Brand Leadership, The Next Revolution in Branding. You'll want to look at that one too. and hidden in plain sight, how to find your next big growth strategy. He's been featured in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, on CNBC. He's often asked for his insights. The latest book is The Interaction Field, The Revolutionary New Way to Create Shared Value for Companies, Customers, and Society. And we're going to talk to him about this in the detail. He's got some great examples. This interaction field model is a new way to think about how you interact with your customers and society. And it'll be a way that you can create smart growth with shared value, right? So I think that all of us are looking at these new interactions with society as well as our customers. Okay, so are you ready, Eric?
Yes, I am. I am here.
The first question. All right. So you have been a thought leader on brand strategy and innovation for over 30 years. I personally know that I've been interacting with you since the early 2000s on brand. So as an academic and a consultant, how did you come to envision and develop this interaction field concept and this new business model?
Look, Lynn, when I started in my career, I felt that one of the big value drivers for business was brands, and brands in those days were a small part, usually a part of the intangible asset value of a company. And back then, in the early 90s, what you saw is that the average company, especially in the B2B world, the average companies, the reputation, the goodwill and brand asset part was only 15% of the total value of the company. And if you look at it today, 2020, it's just the opposite. 85% is the intangible brand value, and 15% and goodwill and reputation, and 50% is the machines, the factory. So we have changed the entire economy. And back in the early 90s, I said that there are not really good tools and processes and ways of managing brands in a proper strategic way. There was, of course, the design agency, the typical ones here in New York City, that change the color of your logos, or they create logos and they call this a brand. But that, you know, in the B2B world isn't about branding. So back then, when I was an academic at various business schools here, I built with a few other professors, we built sort of these early tools, and we didn't build them ourselves. We learned from everyone in the industry. You know, a conversation like this one, you know, people have shared, like ISBM, people share sort of their experiences, and we wrote it up and shared it widely to everyone. That was back then. Then came the world, the early 2000s. It was all about innovation. And I felt like we do a lot of innovation, but most of the times we do it from the inside out. With the product underneath, and say like, oh, we have an innovative R&D department, and we don't look very much from the outside in, from the demand perspective, from the customer perspective, and I felt like if you look from the inside out, and you look with your product and your company and your assets and your capabilities on innovation and on consumers, you have a narrow view of the consumers. You don't see the biggest opportunities because you look at it as wherever you are. If Apple would have looked at the industry from the computer perspective, they would have never gone into music, for God's sake, and created the iPhone because they are into the computer business, right? So, so that was the second book. And then in this new book, I said, well, you know, what is it? What is so fundamentally changing right now, and what is it in the business world where some of these companies create enormous value, and I wrote some of those in the book. And about 6 years ago, there were two academics. You wouldn't know them. They are from the Université de Toulouse, two economists in France, somewhere in France, I should say, Toulouse, beautiful place in the southern part of France. And these two professors won a Nobel Prize. You know, these days actually people win Nobel Prizes. You know, they're just this week, last week, and so forth. But that was 2014. And these two guys, professors, won a Nobel Prize on a book that was even more obscure in 2004. They're written in some place, and they talked about marketplaces, the power of marketplaces. And I felt, when I looked at that, I said, wait, that is a new business model of how we think through competition. And that became the genesis 6 years ago when I said there's something fundamentally changing. And I researched this. And if you look at all the technologies out there right now, the one thing all technologies have done, and you know this particularly, you actually mentioned it just now when we talked about Zoom, and that is today we connect everything. Everywhere, every time, 24/7, we are connected globally. You know, Zoom is just another version of that. But, you know, companies are connected on a constant basis, in a real-time basis. They share data globally. And it is so easy for some companies to do business, you know, literally from the heart of College Station, where you are, to the heart of somewhere in the middle of Germany, Heilbronn, let's say, where I come from originally. And this is now called the hyperconnectivity. And what has happened is all of these technologies, AI, cloud computing, machine learning, they all have conspired to create a new way of how we build companies and how we build brands. And I wanted to describe that shift in that new book. And because I felt that this will fundamentally change the way we grow businesses and the way we innovate as well in the businesses. So, and that's what's now just happening as we speak.
Yeah. So in this creation of value where everybody's connected to everybody else, how do interaction field companies differ from non-interaction field companies? How are they behaving differently?
Yeah, look, in the B2B space, we always had sort of these early marketplaces like Ariba. If you remember, there was sort of a marketplace, or Coupa, and that's sort of like you could buy and sell stuff. But these were marketplaces. They go across all sorts of products and services. And they're also expensive, and they're also cumbersome. I've been on the Ariba platform, if you will, and it's quite difficult to do. And what has happened, and that is now 10, 15, 20 years ago, and what has happened now over the years, technologies has made those marketplaces much easier. So when I talk about interaction fields, I talk about a class of business models, like a marketplace, like a platform, and like a digital ecosystems where several companies come together to create value. And I think of it as an interaction field because it's a broader concept that achieves more than just what a platform combines. And maybe I give you an example of one that struck me. You know, one of the example, it's a whole chapter in my book, is a German company called Klöckner. And Klöckner is into metal trading. And metal trading is one of those many other B2B companies who haven't touched much of technology. If you really know how 5 years ago you do metal trading, you would not believe, Lynn. They still do it with fax and maximum and email. But the number one mode of communication is fax and telephone. And you negotiate prices, and everybody is a better negotiator. And we went to this village in Germany, Duisburg, which is coal country, which is in the middle of nowhere, where people, you can imagine, we have these parts of the world in this country as well. And we met in this dingy office, you know, with metal pipes lying all over the place. This guy named Otto, who was in a telephone call, and he was doing this trading literally, and he was the best trader you can imagine, with the typical way of how this works. And I said, like, this is impossible. How could they get to build something of these new business models? And here's what happened. The CEO, Gisbert Reel, went to a larger city, and what he did is he started out. He has 200,000 customers, and he started out with a simple platform, almost like an e-commerce site, where he asked his existing 200,000 customers to start trading on this e-commerce platform. And he says, look, a lot of our steel or a lot of our beams is commodity steel. The biggest problem in the steel business is the inventory problem, because if you think of a skyscraper here in New York City, you have these massive steel beams. You can't store them very easily like an Amazon can sort of move a package. You need to store them here in New Jersey, and they need to arrive at the right time. Here I live on 75th and Broadway on the Upper West Side. They need, with several tractors, you can't drop them off in front of a door and say, hey, tomorrow I come back. It'll take the whole block, that whole beam. So the biggest problem in the industry is that inventory problem, the cost of those beams. And the idea was, what if we could optimize that or eliminate that inventory problem by actually having the buyers and the sellers of these beams on a platform, create some transparency when the beam has to be at what part of the street corner here in order to build that skyscraper here around us, and at what price. And it was a very simple technology, if you will. It's something that was very easy to do, 2-3 months. And then they started to do this. And then they said, what if we invite competitors also to trade that? And over time, suddenly, because other competitors also went on and says, like, look, we have the same problems. So over time, this little company called Klöckner has built a marketplace where most of their commodity steel is actually traded on this platform. They're called XOM platform. And what has happened is the company not only generated a billion new revenues, they also shifted their salespeople into the higher margins, higher value steam products. So it is, and the other thing they did is they then said, why do we only trade steel? We could trade plastic and so forth. We could trade others. So this has become a massive platform. So what I find so interesting about it is not only they have improved the relationship with their customers, they know exactly what the customers, how the customers pays for the steel, where the steel is located, where it is used, so forth. You learn exactly the applications of the platform that helps them to better in the trading. They also know the price levels. They have sort of removed some of the negotiation that was in the commodity side, which didn't make much sense. They now focus on high margin things where they can actually make really good profits. And they have changed in the industry a massive problem that existed forever. And that was that in transparency on prices and a huge inventory problem, because the steel mills, they were producing steels and those steel beams, as long as they could run the machines. And then they had an inventory problem. And now this removes a significant amount of investments and dollars that was sitting somewhere in New Jersey, somewhere on a big parking lot in some ways. And steel is now produced a lot more to the needs. So what I find interesting in these models is that it is steel is a very difficult business. The growth is really not there. To add additional growth through connecting, and again, you have Laura Patterson talk next week about this, or in the next few weeks. This is customer centricity at the extreme, at the exponential, because now you're trading with your past customers on almost like in a constant basis. You're sharing the data on the application usage. You're producing now is almost just in time, as we used to call it, rather than do what an inventory on a big parking lot in New Jersey. And the cost of transportation you eliminate. So it has cleaned up some of the biggest problems in the industry. It created, and I call this shared value. It created value for customers. It created enormous value for Klöckner, and it created enormous value for the entire industry. And I think this is where we are today. You know, we need to think about these business models that doesn't just sell more stuff, you know, but also that solves sort of a larger problems that we couldn't solve until now. That's what I call an interaction field.
So it's curious that Klöckner took the step to create this space for everybody to interact and share data. How did that work out for their competitors? I mean, that's a big step to, and if your competitors also benefit, right?
That's right. So that is sort of the biggest insight that I had is that, and here's, you know, it comes to me is this is a world, we don't really, if you think of in your personal life, we don't need another mobile phone. Actually, you know, here's my insight. You don't need a mobile 12. I just bought a mobile and an iPhone 11. That's good enough. You need to, you know, everybody buys now iPhone 12 because it just launches. We don't need another washing machine. There we go. We don't need another car. We have plenty of cars to drive. You know, 95% of the cars are not used. In the B2B space, a much bigger industry, it's the same thing. We have a proliferation of products. So the biggest insight I have is when you build these platforms, an interaction field, and you engage customers, what happens is that the more you do that, the more you can actually also engage with competitors because everybody wins. And at first, you know, the idea is, I think we need to fundamentally change this idea from competition and disruption. And we need to move to collaboration, participation, and interaction and engagement. You know, I looked at another company, it's also a chapter in my book. This is a company a little bit further down the street here, on close to the Flatiron building, if you know, in New York, that building talking about iron and metal. And Flatiron Health is a company that's a healthcare business. And what they have done is they have focused on how to solve the problem of cancer. There are 18 million Americans who are diagnosed every year with cancer. What they have done is they have said, if we want to help solve cancer, what we need to do is we almost need to create the Google of cancer information so that doctors know what other doctors are doing. And they went to now 1,200 hospitals, and they have like 10,000 people, like Uber driver type people, very at a minimum wage type things. They walk behind the doctors, and when the doctor does a diagnosis on a patient and scribbles and mumbles and sort of like talks and whatever, anything the person does, they write it down. There's a person behind it called an abstractor. And they take those information because, you know, doctors are there. You can't even read what the prescription they write, you know. So not what the electronic health record is, but every detail, you know, the temperature of the patient, so forth. They aggregate this about over 1.5 million now patients in America who are treated. So lots of treatments. And then they took those data and then they added genome data and DNA data and all the other data you can add to a patient record. And then they went around and then they said, they go to Pfizer and say, that's one pharmaceutical company that sells drugs, you know, cancer drugs called Avastin. They said, look, we have all this data. Can we look at how your Avastin is effective with what kind of patient population and so forth? And then they did that. And then Pfizer said, thank you very much. We learned a lot. But then they did the other thing. They also invited a competitor, Roche. And then they invited every other competitors. And you know what has been found? One of the most significant findings in this work has been due to that data from Flatiron, these massive interactions, if you will. They found that many of the drugs by itself actually don't work that well as in combination. So here, because two competitors come together, you actually create value. Number two, they found many times you don't need a drug at all. You know, you can have a therapy, you eat better, you maybe do exercise. There are some alternatives that you can live with a cancer. So the old default idea, oh, you're diagnosed, go and get a drug, you know, then look like a vegetable 3 months later or something, or forever, you know, that is over. So now competitors share the data. And you know what's the most important finding is? Most important is that the drug administration that approves the drug, it says, this is so valuable when everybody participates, drug companies participate. We have the data, the hospitals participate, the patients provide this highly sensitive data. Physicians provide the data. If we take all of those interactions, that's an interaction field. And if we all do that, then we can approve a drug a lot earlier for certain conditions. So, and so what that means is that a lot of lives have been now saved because you have 18 months survival rate, 18 months to survival when you're diagnosed with certain conditions. And the FDA has now, a positive side of this administration, actually approved the drugs earlier and has sort of like been able to save life before that 18 months sort of expiration date. And so again, these are problems and challenges. Interaction fields, Lynn, are problems and challenges that are complex B2B problems that you can solve only when everybody connects, when everybody interacts, when everybody shares data, even the most sensitive healthcare data. If you are diagnosed, Lynn, with cancer and you've been told that you have an 18-month life chance to survive cancer, you know, will you share your data? Hell yes, you know, and if it doesn't help you, it helps the next generation or the next patient. So this is a beautiful thing. And in the book, I look at various industries, and there is of course a lot of discussion about the consumer side, but in the B2B side, there are massive industries that benefit from this new approach. That's why I've been working on this.
So it sounds to me that there's two elements I can come up with. I'm going to ask you about the rest. One is that there's a problem that probably the industry, up until the point that they do something differently, as you described, just says, that's the way it is. It's always been that way, and that's how it is. And so someone has to step up and say, well, we can do it differently. The other is there's usually a massive amount of data that hasn't been either collected or shared. Are there other elements of the interaction field that would hint to where we could use this more?
Yes, that you're really tipping to sort of how I define sort of like the way. The first thing is that interaction fields solve problems that are intractable, that usually are not solvable with just let's push out another product, you know, something like that somewhere. So that's one thing. The second thing, and usually there are consumer problems that you can solve, or customer problems that the customers have. You know, Otto, the one I tracked at Kleckner, Otto, he had a pen and a pencil and a piece of paper, and he had it stuck in here. And all of his negotiations and the prices, he recorded, and then he scratched it out, and there were these numbers from 1,300,000, 3,250,000, or whatever. That's how he negotiated it. That's a pretty bad tracking. So at Kleckner, there was a solution. What if this guy goes for lunch, you know, whatever, it loses the paper. So there are problems. That's what I call the hierarchy of challenges, if you will. And there are problems that at the customer level that it solves. Then there are problems at the industry level, like the inventory problem, that industries just have come to do operate in a certain way, to have a certain marketing way, and sometimes it's not the best way and the most efficient. And then there's also societal way. So there are these three levels of things. Then the second part to me is and you tap on this too, and this is what I can say. How do you create such a platform? And there are these three things. One is the interactions. You know, is it just about the frequency of the interaction? Like let's take an example we all know very well. Amazon. Amazon is a lot of transactions. They know what you buy, and because what you buy, they can recommend something else. And it's a transaction business. But there's also the quality of interaction. So when we look at, and we designed it at Vivaldi, we look at what is the kind of data that are shared? What is the kind of interactions they have? Is it like a daily interaction? Is it an always on interaction? Is it so the more the quality of the interactions and what kind of interactions they have, what kind of data do you share? Is it very sensitive data that are mission critical? An example, Tesla now shares their entire technology on the battery production. That's a breakthrough. You know, here are car companies. All the car companies who have to go now on electric. Now, the leader on the electric is, of course, Tesla. Now, Tesla, each one of these car companies, and I work with one of them, they are all obsessed with how to close the gap in battery technology, which is the most expensive part on electric, to Tesla. Tesla, while all this car company research, how can we close the gap to Tesla? What do we need to do? How do we get our electrical engineers to figure this out? Tesla says, you know what? I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this with the industry. Because at the end of the day, I have an advantage as Tesla, but at the end of the day, we all benefit because more, you know how the experience curves, the more we share, the more the cost of the batteries go down, experience curve. And then the cost of the cars, electric cars go down and the market will grow for electric cars. So Tesla benefits at the end, they will benefit. So they don't do it for altruistic, but it's a sharing among competitors of something that was supposed to be. So that's a quality of interaction, exchange within the industry that I'm talking about. The other one, there's sort of two more parts to that. And one of it is what I call an architecture. So is it open or is it closed? Do you say, I'm only working with certain other partners, I'm only working with certain competitors, but not all competitors? Or is it an open field that everybody can join that qualifies? So it's an open versus a closed system. So there are various architecture models for in order to make that work. And the third part is very important. It's the governance. You know, who pays for what? How do you share? Who makes money? And so when you don't get those three things right, Lynn, and how to create it, interaction, architecture, and governance, the rules that everybody needs to play by. If you don't get that right, it never takes off. 85% of the business models don't take off because they don't get it right. Don't get those three things right. So there's a lot to work to do still, and there's a lot of failures happening as well. But that's sort of the dynamic.
Do you run against any laws in terms of competitors collaborating with each other that you have to worry about when you're creating an interaction field business model?
You know, one of the case studies I have in the book is that I really like is John Deere, and in the John Deere, if you think of an agricultural field, in order to make the crop grow, yes, John Deere prefers that you drive with a 9X, is it called, which is a top of the line John Deere tractor. That sets you back $800,000. I think you can buy a few Rolls Royces for that. Mm-hmm. So think about the American farmer who has to buy that 3 Rolls Royces in order to just to have that John Deere. So you can also use some other machine that's are not of the same quality and standing. And John Deere has built also an interaction field like that. And the whole field, in order to grow the crop and make the farm productive, that a good tractor helps. You know, if you drive with a John Deere, it's like driving with a top of the line Rolls Royce. It makes you feel good, but it's not all that makes a crop grow. You need fertilizer. You need the right crop at the right time. You need the harvesting at the right time. There's so much more. The agriculture is actually quite complex, and good weather conditions and everything. So John Deere says, if farmers share with us those data from the field on a regular basis, let's look at those data and let's share them with, let's say, crop companies and with Dow, which is Dow Crop Science. They sell fertilizers, and then there's Syngenta's fertilizers. And here's what happens: up to now, without that system, without an interaction field model, all the fertilizer companies, Syngenta, Dow, BASF, they all visit the farmer, and they're trying to sell to the farmer their fertilizer. My fertilizer is better than their fertilizer, and they sell by the pound as much as you can. You know what that happens? The more fertilizer you put on the plant, the better the plant grows, but also the more you destroy your field, because you cannot plant again for another year or two, or the cycle has to be, because too much fertilizer that destroys everything else too. So when the problem here is how do you orchestrate in a situation like that, where you go into the data, go through the data, and you say to the farmer, you don't really need all that much pound on the plant. So that reduces the cost, the sales of the fertilizer companies. And then you need to figure out how can these three fertilizer companies still benefit from each other. And the beautiful thing that of the experimentation that John Deere has done now, it's called John Deere Open Platform. What has done is if you actually look at the fields, the fertilizer companies sell less per farmers, but the whole market still increases. So even though they sell less per one farmer, their business is still growing, because more farmers adopt the right fertilizers, and actually everybody benefits. But that's not very easy to begin with. You know, you need a different mindset. You need to this is sort of one rules of my book. You need to start framing the problem very differently. Am I a fertilizer company, or am I there in order to help the farmers be more productive, create more profits per farm? If you do that, then you think about very differently. You save costs on marketing, because you don't have to, compete anymore. You collaborate. Then you realize that some fertilizer works over here, the other fertilizer works over there. When the farms are profitable, and many farms unfortunately are not profitable, there is no government subsidies necessary. One of the biggest subsidies in industries goes to farms. So all of this. So what happens is, when you build an interaction field, and this is, if you frame that properly, if you really solve the right problem, as you mentioned earlier, Lynn, if you create and design the right interactions, architecture, and governance, you actually clean up a lot of the challenges we have in that industry. And so that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah, so if I'm a B2B company, and so I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, okay, so I should really know my customers better. That's always a first rule of a B2B company, right? Know my customers, how they make money. It really is also a question of where have I stopped thinking very hard because I don't think I can do anything about the question. So like the John Deere example, if my goal was to make sure you had equipment, farm equipment that could efficiently plant seeds and harvest, that's a different question than saying, how can I make the farmer more money?
That's right. So
taking on that job of how to make the farmer more money, that's huge, right? Where
that's
do I
huge.
stop thinking
But
about that?
you know that there is John Deere is a very proud company. It's one of the best companies you can imagine, a $30 billion business in Moline, Illinois. You have no idea how how if with a heritage of a company like that, where there is even the name of the founder still on the top, right, on the things, and who says, as long as a deer has my name on it, it's gonna be the best deer you can get. So the whole company is geared toward producing the best, and they are one of the best technologies in the tractors and combines in the business, and so but what also, and there is nothing wrong with all of that business. That's what we call a traditional pipeline business. You have good manufacturing, good engineering, good R&D, and so forth. But what happens is that when you put the best tractors on the field, even you put the best tractors, the most expensive tractors on the field, you create you have sensors on the tractors that tell you sort of where plants, there is a health of the plant, and here you need to, you cut it. If you do precision farming, today, like for example, you can take a tractor that mows at an inch, 2.5 centimeters, as accurate one from one to the other. So it's like an incredible achievement. Many of the tractors are autonomous, actually, already. You know, what we hope in the real world here on the streets already still to happen. But if you do that, the research that I looked at shows that the average productivity of a hectare is 3,549 kilos per hectare of wheat, let's say, or corn, whatever. And if you were to increase, if you were to do the best under the traditional model, you get the best fertilizer, you get the best crop, you get the best tractors, and you're trying to optimize the harvest, the timing of harvest. You can increase this by 10% about. Now, if everybody works together in an interaction field, if we all share the data that are collected from the farmers, and to your point, if the mind shift goes away, how do we make farms more productive or profitable? Farmers even share their profit numbers from the farm, so that's beautiful, the operating numbers. If you shift from the best of everything, of each of the product, each of the services, to this interaction field model, the estimation is that the productivity of the farm goes to 7,820 kilos per hectare, so more than double. And if you do that, then you really solve a lot of the food problems we have. Do you know that 40 million Americans in this country still don't eat well, and not enough, and don't have to eat enough? 40 million in this country with this kind of wealth. Now imagine this in the world, if you project it in the world. So, and we also know that there is this, to 2050, the population growth is massive around the world. So American farms are so productive already at 3,580 is the highest level of all the farms in the world. So American farms are very productive, but American farms could double that productivity. And if they were to do that, they could solve or eradicate world hunger. So it's only American farms. It's because we are such a big country. So it is a beautiful thing when you think about, there's nothing wrong in this. We do all the right things if we focus on the product, the best tractor. But there is another way we can create value, and that's what the book is about. You've got to think about how to collaborate, how to create an interaction field company, how do you engage, how do you participate, and get farmers. You know, imagine farmers participate in that. They're the most conservative. The farmers would never want to know what to get data away that the next farmer next door would utilize. And the beautiful thing is there are now farmers actually saying, you know what, I can learn. If I'm in Oklahoma, I can learn from the guys over there in Nebraska. You know, I don't like them necessarily. I'm not going over that farm, but I can learn from those things. So it's a beautiful system that can be built, and it doesn't take that long, because the most important thing, Linus, is the technology right now is available. We don't have to wait for that. We couldn't have done it 5 years ago, but a lot of it it's already right there.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I was thinking back about, you know, how evolutionarily if you just think about farmers and where they started from and where they are today, and how it's very difficult to be a family farm and just say, I learned everything from my parents and my grandparents. You know, they need formal educations in the technology that they're using.
Yeah.
But we have come to this point where we can produce well. My memory of the early days of the pandemic was they produced so well we couldn't distribute, right? Which just sounds like another interaction field that's missing.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
If we can see the big picture, not just I made this and I shipped it and somebody bought it and I delivered on time, in our old way of thinking of that's good, but now it's this bigger picture of how well have we used all these resources? Have we optimized that for everything that we can see in the whole delivery chain? Right?
For every tomato or for every farm product that you see, you have no idea how much gets lost on the way. And if you in distribution, in logistics, so overproductions on the farms, you know, that never reaches the consumer. It's not something that you can solve by yourself, but you can begin. The way John Deere did it is, you know, first they collected data, then they collected a farm next door. Then they say like, hey, look at the two farms, look at what we can learn. Oh, we can learn from each other. I didn't think that I can learn from the millers over there. They have some, you know, that's a different one. They're not like us here, whatever. And so they learn, and that's how it. So and in this world, these things are very viral. They build very fast. Farmers are very smart. They adopt this technology very fast. You would be amazed, Lynn, how technology is sort of impacting the farm field. But again, you know, here we go. If you frame, I love your point, because if you talk about framing and says, I am going to serve those close to the land, namely farmers, let's say. That's a different frame, that I have the best fertilizers. I have the best fertilizers or the best tractor that allows you to watch Netflix, because we have a lot of screens inside our cockpit or something like that. You know, whatever. At least it reduces the boredom of the farmer who lumbers down the farm at 7-8 miles per hour top speed for the 800,000 monster.
The interaction field, though, I think it presupposes that there is a change of human nature that's required, right? So I grew up in the 80s and 90s in business, working with automotive, right? Yes. And really large automotive companies, don't want to annoy anybody by, you know, picking let's just say General Motors. Lived inside their own interaction field, right? They were big enough and had supply chains large enough that they could drive their own interaction field, whether you want to participate or not, right? I control that data. But and that attitude still exists. It's still right? You can't run an interaction field and get all the data, though, unless you've got a whole different mindset, right? Yes,
yes, totally. You know, I was with one of the large car companies, and one of the managers took me aside. He's 55 years old. I don't mention the company. And the first thing he says to me, he says, Eric, if I had heard this a few years ago, I would have thrown you out. Everybody would have not listened to you. They sent you back to America. And today I realize that this is the new world. But you know what? I'm 55 years old. This is not anymore my time. I'm waiting for the next. And you know, the beautiful thing is that I can show you, I can share this with the audience. There is now this massive red hot area of B2B marketplaces. And this year, especially a lot of attention to this. And one of the big factors of why these marketplaces are now starting up and get successful in every area of business to business. And it is the fact that this new generation of millennials come into the workforce, and they say, wait a moment, that makes no sense. You know, and they build this, and because technology is relatively cheap through cloud computing, we have access to all of the software as a service solutions. So we can see this happening right now. This marketplace is red hot right now. So I think that this is all happening because it takes a new generation of people who solve the problem and says, and again, I totally agree with what you said. You know, today somebody, when you farm, you need to think about the leakage of, or the water loss that, and how much water actually reaches the plant. Only 40% of the water gets lost on the way, 60%. You know, it's always been that way. We have lived with that way, and that's just how it was. The new generation walks in and says, well, that makes no sense anymore, because water is a very scarce resource, and it's getting more and more expensive for us. And I need to solve this before, as part of my starting a business. So yeah, the other beautiful thing, Lynn, is that these systems networks. And by the way, I shouldn't even, I'm not the only one who talks about this. Do you know Jerry Wind, who is also an ISBM member, and a really prolific one? Jerry Wind wrote a book called The Network Imperative, and it's about 3-4 years old, but he already tapped into the same ideas, these networks, what I call now an interaction field. So this is a real movement. But what's the beautiful thing is, what I encourage many is, you don't have to build it yourself. There is now a very massive one, several actually in the agricultural field. If you start a company now, if you sort of are a small business, a medium-sized business, one of the starting points is, you know, maybe I'm not going to just push another product out. Maybe I'm working with one of those networks. I become a participant in the network. So it's called open platform. It's a John Deere open platform. So you can actually easily participate in. Years ago, that mindset wouldn't even exist. You know, oh, this is mine. This is my data. It's my network. It's my, you know, like I wouldn't share with anybody. And I think, you know, everything that we have come through over the years, including the pandemic, has made us now realize that nobody can do it alone. So sometimes you can just join a network, an existing network.
Yeah, I've seen startup companies that make no product, but are talking about aggregating data, right, for market segments, right?
Yeah.
And if you can get the players to play, then they have a real value, and of course they become a real company after that. They get funded.
Yeah, Flatiron was the example I mentioned earlier. It's aggregating data in some ways,
we have a couple minutes left, and I'm going to just encourage people, if they still have questions, to type them in, because I've been fielding and folding them into what I've been saying to you. But I am just curious if you have some solutions to our COVID issues that could be handled by this model.
Oh, I wish somebody from Washington, D.C. calls me for that.
Record it. I can send it forward.
Oh, that's a good. No, I think that the pandemic, you know, in a way, the pandemic is a very good example, because if you look right now, you see there are 6 companies that are in the process of coming up with a vaccine, and each one of them works in various trials. I think 2 already have stopped, 2 have altogether, 2 have stopped, 2 are still working. So it's not a very good picture, as I understand, when Johnson & Johnson stops the trial because somebody got seriously ill. The key to the pandemic, to the solution, to finding a vaccine, is the speed with which these things are developed, and the only way you can develop a drug with that speed is, in my opinion, is when every one of the drug companies works together and not everyone runs their own trials. So, and I'm glad you asked the question, because if you think of what I mentioned earlier about Flatiron Health and the cancer solution, I think that applies here as well, and to solving the vaccine in the pandemic. So I think that's one question that goes to the developing a solution to the COVID-19. But I also think what I have found is that You know, but like around here, New York, if you look here, I live here on Broadway, right here. If you look on Broadway, it is a sad story. You see one store after the other store boarded up, you know, temporarily out of business and then permanently out of business, retail stores. So there is, well, if you look a little bit further down the street, there's Wall Street, by the way, and they are celebrating every day. They're drunk. They get. I mean, this is like insane what you see at the end of Broadway there on things. But everyone else is really seriously suffering. So here's the thing. If you are like a retailer, let's say, or any small business in the pandemic, there are solutions to that. There are like a practical example from a consumer side is Shopify. You can in 2 days replace what you have in your storefront and build a website on Shopify with payment solution, logistics solution, and everything. So what happens is, and the same thing in the B2B world, I'd like to go into this in the more detail, but in the B2B world, it's the same thing. What costs you years to build an e-commerce function, which is an initial start toward an interaction field model, takes you a few days, can take you a few days. So I think that the pandemic, there are solutions for many companies that are literally, you need to literally just tap into those. So that's the good news. But there are the same thing like for example, the Miracle is one that builds marketplaces for B2B companies. You can tap into an existing customer base on Miracle is the company's called. So there are these solutions that we can all sort of like immediately take actions to that ordinary companies like here really benefit from.
Good. Well, I look forward to this. I'm going to give one more call out if anybody wants to type to us. I just have one last question that I see. So toxic value chains where price competition is like the only thing that lives inside that space. Is there a way to break that up and disincentivize that and allow the whole value chain to re-innovate itself?
Yeah, see the problem with the value chains, many of the value chains, and you talk about that the result is the result is a price competition. The way I think about it is the price competition is a symptoms, but it's not the disease. It's just a symptom of a problem. The cause is that over hundreds of years now, in the first, second, and third industrial revolution, we had one business model, and that business was a value chain, a set of activities, a pipeline, a set of activities where we perform a certain task or functions that creates a product or service that we then sell. That's the pipeline business. That's a value chain business. And we say, we are better on marketing, we are better on R&D, we are better on this. And marketing us, we need to sort of write messaging about, we are better, faster, and cheaper type things, and that is the problem. So so what happens is, the problem is that over the years, especially in the last 10 years, this value chain has been optimized, globalized, and there is very little you can actually optimize anymore, in my opinion. Technology, they're all technological marvels themselves. It's almost like squeezing water out of a stone, so hard it is. So the only solution to that, and like if you talk about metal trading, that's a perfect example of that we mentioned earlier with Klöckner. The solution is to build around that the interaction field company, and then you take the price competition, like in the Klöckner example, you make the commodity side the price at a price level, you standardize level. That was a nightmare to actually make that happen. It did work. and then you focus on the higher margins and things like that. That was the example of Klöckner. But the most important thing is when we look in the business school case studies as professors, we teach the pricing problem, and we solve a pricing problem. How do you solve a problem? How do you price in this heavy competition, in a price competition? Yeah, that's solving the symptoms and fixing the symptoms, but not the problem. I think that the interaction field model, and I have many examples in the book, shows that you don't, and this is sort of the difference, you don't abandon the value chain business. You augment it, gradually.
Yeah.
And then suddenly.
Yeah, I think that's also insightful that, of course, what we teach comes back to us is what we do. And so it's why generationally it takes a while to make changes. But
yeah, I mean, I have a real problem, at Vivaldi. Our clients, they come to us, they say, we have a problem. You have 3 months to solve it. It's a brand problem. It's a pricing problem. Fix it. Yeah. And then we go like, yeah, you can fix the problem, but wait a moment, there's a much larger thing we need to consider, and so it's the business we live. Yeah.
I don't remember when we've taught collaboration, so it's interesting, right? I will put a pitch in for my favorite organization, FIRST, FIRST, which is for Inspiration in Science and Technology, and founded by Dean Kamen up in Boston, and it's where the robotics teams are running. Mm-hmm. They run under a model where if you have a robotics team as a high school student, they call something cooperation. Yeah, cooperation. At any point in time, you've got to be able to work with others to be successful, but you might be competing with them the next time. And how do you do that? That makes the kids think differently, and that is the only place I know where they learn that. It's not nice. But it's this is a good friend of mine, David Joffe at Harvard, who came up with a concept of co-opetition, and Brandenburger, Adam Brandenburger, that they termed it many years ago, and that that model, that idea that sometimes you compete and sometimes you collaborate, that is now changing, because now in the pandemic and the times we live, many companies say, look, that's not that, we need to do, this is not an on and off relationship. This is an always on relationship. So for example, if you look at BMW and Bosch produces the electronics to BMW cars, also Mercedes cars, one of the best electronics companies. But Bosch and BMW is also in court about a dispute, about some procurement dispute, So for hundreds of years, or not that many years, but many years now, 50, 60, 70 years, these two companies collaborate on one side, and on the other side, they sue each other in court about some contractual relationships. And I think the pandemic has made us clearer and clearer that this can't work anymore like this. And but I think this is not, the pandemic is only almost an accelerator. I have seen this for many years, because if you look today, I mean, if you look today, compare Amazon to Alibaba. Alibaba is a B2B platform. Alibaba is vastly more successful than Amazon, because Alibaba is building, it's a wholesale B2B platform that actually builds the business of the retailers. There are 6 million more small mom and pop shops. They don't go out of business. Look at Amazon. Amazon goes in one industry, everybody chitters, and then they close the doors, because Amazon is about disruption and destroying, starting with booksellers 20 years ago to every other industry today. And so it's a different mindset that is happening. And so I think the pandemic, and Alibaba has done incredibly well in the pandemic, and is building in China globally now. It's coming to the US now. It's building basically these massive interaction fields where everybody participates, everybody benefits. Shared value. That's the book. I wish we'd had this about 4 p.m, so I could send everybody off for a drink, and we could then talk about social behavior and the human nature and some stuff that I really want to bring up, but it's after
It
1.
starts there, yeah. Hey, wait, we can make an exception. Come to New York, we have a three martini lunch. I think that's the old days of marketing.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank everyone because I see people are dropping off with us, but I want to thank everybody for joining us. This recording will be available in a day or so. Feel free to share it with others. Lori, you can go ahead and turn the recording off. Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate having this time.
Absolutely.